Welcome back to Suffering in Paradise, where we discuss the social dynamics of growing up in a westernized paradise by leveraging experiences, wisdom, and knowledge to provide a very unique perspective to you, the viewers. Last time, I missed a couple of formalities here and there, but as you can see, we have a studio, we have an actual place to record, so it's quite awesome, actually. So if you're tuning in from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever it may be, you can head over to YouTube and just look up Suffering in Paradise, and it'll be an actual video, because I know some people actually like to actually see the actual podcast happening instead of just listening to it. So that's honestly kind of cool. But yeah, I just want to actually introduce Declan as our new permanent co-host. It's just pretty awesome. We're making some big steps here. We got Jared behind the camera for the media team here. We got working on a website to have some formalities there. But yeah, some big moves. So just watch out for those. Yeah, moving forward with the topic, I want to kind of introduce our topic for today. So we're talking about the norms of location on social. Sorry, the impacts of location on social norms and the social dynamics of that and whatnot. So I think I'll pass over to Declan so we can actually formally define what we mean by location.
Yeah, thanks, Aarsh. I'm so excited to be here and be a co-host. I know we've got a great team, so really excited to move forward with that. And now to go kind of into the topic. So when I'm thinking about location and what it means to your identity, I really want to push past the definition of it just being a particular place.
Yeah.
We want to really take in all the different attributes that come with it and all the different opportunities. And there's so many different factors that we'll really go into in this conversation. And I'm really excited to kind of talk about how we can leverage our own particular experiences and see this. So now to go on to a little bit more of terminology, because there's a specific theme that will be reoccurring within this podcast. And that's really this idea of a social contract. So maybe I'll just push it over to you, Aarsh, and see what you have to say on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. This idea of, I don't know if you guys have, I don't know if they've actually this is quite it's a common term, but I'm not sure if a lot of people kind of understand what it means really. But in formally, I would say a social contract is it's an implicit and explicit kind of set of rules between society, the society you live in, the political stance, and the government that you kind of in the society that you live in, right? So these rules kind of are a really big social dependency on how we kind of take upon our just our daily lives in a sense. And so these social contracts really differ between different locations, as we defined, like you just defined. And so living in Canada, our social contract would differ quite a lot from a place maybe China or somewhere in Asia, where a social contract in the U.S. might be quite similar, just because of the dynamics of what kind of goes on there, the government and what the freedoms are and the opportunities there are. So I just wanted to kind of put that as a formal thing of what the social contract actually is, so that when we actually refer to it, it makes sense to you guys. So
yeah, for sure. And I think that's such because we're going to be talking about the different factors that really affect identity, specifically with location. And this idea of a social contract is really this overbearing idea within it. So Arsh touched on this, but geographic is definitely huge. If you live in a certain location in the world, obviously you're going to have a different life than you would otherwise. I know for me personally, and I know that you probably have a similar experience with families who are immigrants, right? So I'm a first generation Canadian, and my mother, she actually immigrated from Kenya, and her grandparents, it's actually really funny because my family is originally from India, so we're this family of immigrants who's kind of been all over the world. So I feel I have a good idea of what location actually means in terms of your identity, because I know that I'm having a very different lifestyle than what my mom had, and what my mom had is very different from what her grandparents had. And
that's not only to do with just the location of it. It's also a time period, and that's why when we talked about location, it was also the fact that location is not just the particular place; it's also the time period where you're living in and things like that. So I think your grandparents, yes, they lived in a completely different country, and then that was a major factor, but the time period also probably had a pretty big impact on the norms there.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel that's especially seen when I'm thinking about what my grandpa always says to me and all the stories that he tells me. He tells me about the location and the beauty of it. He tells me when he was in Kenya, he would see the rain trickling off the the leaves and how
Yeah.
it seemed so much greener there.
Yeah.
And like just that connection to the land is just so different from what he has here
Well,
in
yeah,
Canada.
here
And
it's
it's
completely
not,
different.
yeah, it's completely different. And he thinks about like all the fresh fruit that he has, but it's all about like how you identify it within your brain, really. Because I know my grandma, she's a completely different image of Kenya. Like she was
Really?
really the one. Yeah, she was really the one who wanted to immigrate because her experiences there were probably more negative.
Well, yeah.
I mean, she hasn't really opened up to me too much on this subject, but like you can really romanticize like a location within your brain, and then you can also like have like
Yeah.
a completely negative association with it. So I think that's like really interesting as well.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting, the fact that like they both were like from the same place, but they had like quite different views on it as well. Because, I mean, if they both lived in Kenya, right? Is that correct? Like, and your grandpa had a really good time there, then like maybe the contract that she abided by was quite completely different, and maybe she was in a time of struggle or opportunity wasn't there, and that's why she moved here.
Yeah, I mean, my grandparents definitely did have a completely different upbringing, and I think that is seen within their perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's also shows why location is so much more than just like a particular place, because it's really how you perceive it, right? It's how you perceive it through your social connections, through like the time period, right? And like so many different things, and just your lifestyle, really.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, yeah, I agree.
So, I mean, like here in Canada and in Calgary, it's different for both of us because we both came from Regina and I guess Lethbridge. So
I think even if we look at the differences between where I came from in Calgary, I'd say it's actually like there are a lot of like the same things. Obviously, we live in the same country. Province is different for me, but they're quite similar. I didn't move very far, but there are little things that you just don't realize until you actually move and you see those things for yourself and experience them for yourselves. And to say like, hey, like me being in Calgary rather than Regina, like it's not the same. And there's little things that just don't kind of add up on both ends, if that kind of makes sense.
what do you mean, like?
Well, I'll give you an example. So. Economically in Saskatchewan, in Regina, at least where I went, there was an economic disparity, I think, within like the people. But I think I've been definitely like really exposed to like a lot more wide range of people. So there's lots of like wealth and things that I didn't see a lot in Regina. And like you would think like, hey, like it's just a city, like there would still be wealthy people there, but coming here, I see that there's like immense disparity between the two, if that kind of gives more intuition behind why it's very different for me to live here rather than in Regina, at least.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that too, and it's almost sad seeing that, like how the difference between high school and university is really not necessarily like school smarts, right? It's sorry, not school smarts. It's not necessarily like pure intelligence.
Yeah.
A lot of the time it's like opportunity, and it's that economic opportunity, because I know a lot of people who could have gone to university but just honestly had to take a few years off and
to
work.
work.
Yeah. And it's too bad to see this, but it's just kind of a reality that we live in. So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely there's just lots of different political norms on that as well to try to fix that. But I mean, we live in Canada, so I mean, like location, like that's actually like a really good point that you bring in there. The fact that it is like quite hard to see like that people need to work like that, and other countries, we as Canada would just see like, okay, like this is capitalism, you have to work hard and you have to work for that money and you have to try to get it. And then there's other countries that have like completely different views on that, right? Like like communist countries where they try to equal it out, right? Like obviously I have never lived in China, so maybe it'd be interesting to get a perspective on that. But even like places like I believe Norway, they have free education, right? So like opportunity cost, they have the opportunity to get a full education and kind of lead a life with being fully educated and getting a job where you actually want to pursue, rather than, oh hey, like I have to work and I have to like actually pay bills and things like that. And I think that like the fact that like living in a place like Norway would be quite different, right? But it'd also be like a lot better for that economic disparity, I think.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is, I feel like it's really easy to make those generalizations. And
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, because like even when I think about like, oh, we're Canadian, we have like those like really amazing opportunities. I think of like right? Like I think of like someone who even lives on our floor and who we interact with like quite a bit, like because of like her upbringing and her religion. she was like always discouraged to go to university and pursue those opportunities, right? But like that, like she was living in Canada and this was happening, right? Like
like you don't even realize that. Like
Yeah.
I had no exposure to anything of the sort. I would think that was probably in a time period or location in the past, even not even like somewhere else in the world. And I'm sure it is happening. If it's happening here in Canada, I'm more than definitely sure that's probably happening somewhere else too, right? Which is quite scary, actually.
For sure. And I think it's so easy to like just be like, oh, that's not happening here. It's like
it's easy to make that generalization.
It's easy to just say like, oh, you're from Canada, you had the best opportunities, but that's not necessarily always the case.
No.
In fact, like often we see that it's only that like select few people who are getting all these opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's like that tokenism that they're getting in the spotlight and they're showing off those opportunities, so then everyone just thinks that you had those opportunities in life, whereas most people don't have those opportunities. Like
just being in Canada doesn't entitle you to that opportunity right away. I think that's actually a really fun point.
It entitles us to like a certain political stability and rights and freedoms, and which I'm extremely grateful for. Don't get me wrong, but it
freedoms to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent.
So like obviously I appreciate there's like basic freedoms where we can do what we want, but there's so much more freedom to that, right? And doing what you want to do in your life, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think we could go into a whole different discussion on freedoms and like how different groups within Canada have been treated and whatnot. But I feel like that's maybe a discussion for another time. But like even if you look at just like how like cities are organized and how like I guess for you and I, like coming from like a smaller city into a bigger city, like I was able to see really like the dichotomy between like farm and versus big city type things, actually, right? And I think that's like really interesting. Like, what do you kind of think of that?
I wasn't I'm from Saskatchewan, so it's like literally farmland, but like it's weird to say, but I wasn't actually exposed to a lot of that like farm life. More like I was more of just like kind of staying in the city. Regina isn't like tiny, but like most of the economy is based around. And I mean, it's all to do with the actual particular location, like in this case where literally we're surrounded by just like land and the land is being farmed. That's what our economy is based off of. And I mean, that's fair, but I mean, I wasn't too involved in the farm side of it. So coming here, there wasn't really much of a change, at least.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I'm really overwhelmed with like opportunities,
really?
Like because like I feel like at least in Lethbridge there weren't nearly as many opportunities now. And I feel like it's kind of like this have you heard of the paradox of progress, like that kind of like psychological term that refers to like how we think that we're always progressing throughout time, but that's not necessarily always the case. I feel like I'm kind of dealing with one of the factors, which is actually like they talked about how there's like because there's more choices, there's more stuff to regret. I feel like I'm kind of dealing with that now because there's so many opportunities.
What do you
missing out on?
Go back to that paradox. I've never heard of this term. Like, what is this paradox? Because I've never heard of it.
It's basically I actually learned this in my psychology class, and it's basically this idea that throughout time, we think that we're always happier as a species. Like we think that humans have continuously grown and become evoluted
to like a better society.
A better lifestyle, and like that we're like just like better off than
and
we were in the past.
And that's because of the advancements that we made in technology. Then or
like there's different factors, right? There's time, there's technology, like time saving things. Like one of the other factors was like time saving, right?
Yeah.
So we even though we have all these things that save us time, like we don't have to like light a candle and like we can just flip a switch, right? And we don't have to like, if we want food, we can just go to the grocery store and get it. We don't have to harvest like a whole field to get it, right? Yeah. So like that, but like still, we always feel like we don't have enough time, right? So like that's like in a way that's like paradoxical, right? Yeah. So then bringing it back to like, oh my gosh, I forgot what I was saying. So like kind of bringing it back to that idea of like time and like how we think that
you were just talking about the the paradox and how you felt that because you had more choice that you might be
because I feel like now that I've moved from like, especially because like within Lethbridge, I was involved within like the ag industry. Like I did agricultural research and whatnot. I feel like I was really like involved within that. Now that I'm here in Calgary, I feel like there's so many opportunities that I'm actually like missing out, and like I'm feeling like there's more stuff to regret.
Yeah.
So I think that's just like interesting for me. I don't know if you kind of feel that way too.
Yeah. I think it's like I feel like that's more of a thing where it comes with time, right? You don't actually have to like. You don't need to feel like those feelings of regret or missed opportunity, because I think that we're still in our first year and things like that. Particularly speaking, like, no, I don't feel that I'm missing opportunities. I actually think that, like, because coming from Regina, like, our location had very little opportunity, and so to be exposed to even like some opportunity and being able to take advantage of even a little bit of it is quite a big accomplishment for me, at least, because even like one step forward for me, it's my experience in the past versus my experience now, right? So
yeah, I can see that, but like for me, when I'm thinking about that next step, like I don't know what the best step would be.
Yeah.
And like there's so many different steps I can take before, like in Lethbridge, I felt like there was like
one
three
linear,
different,
more of a linear path.
There's like three
yeah.
steps I could take, whereas now I can take 100 steps. And
I actually
like,
agree.
Which step is going to be the best for me in the long term, right?
And in that sense, I do agree, because but I think that, like, you never know, right? Like the step that you end up taking, I mean, it'll yield success or it'll yield failure, but either way, like, you would have never known what the other one was, right? So, I mean, maybe make the choices carefully, but you can't really balance everything, right? Like, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my perspective on it, at least. I kind of want to move past this idea of kind of our personal experiences and kind of move past what we kind of see within the media as well, and kind of what we see across even the U.S. and across the world. I think I find it quite interesting actually meeting people from across like that have lived in other locations and experienced a lot of different things, especially now that we're all kind of, there's a lot of people in residence and we all kind of live in the same environment. Where we're kind of adapting in a similar way, but they're adapting from a completely different culture than we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people from, like, all over the world, like the Philippines, like from Asia, from Europe, from like the U.S., and I think that it's really interesting to see that these people who've had similar, like, it's really cool that they've had similar norms, but also like completely different norms, and they're coming together and kind of, we're all in this one norm of this university. So I think that's actually really, really cool, and I'd like to kind of, like, what, do you have any thoughts on that yet, or?
Well, when you said that, it just reminded me of like Pavan and like the cultural difference, and like how I remember the story of like Scott telling me like how he ran up to Scott and he was like, because like I guess he to give you some context, Pavan grew up in the Philippines, and apparently they didn't have as many like telemarketers there, and essentially Pavan got a call and that said he got a call and it was like this is a call from the Department of Security saying that your passport has been taken away. And he ran into Scott's room. He was terrified, and he was giving them all this information. Then Scott had to like take a minute and explain to him what was going on. So just like thinking about that cultural divide is just like,
well, yeah, like it's for us, it's like, oh, one thing, oh, hey, end call, put it down, resume what we're doing, or if we can maybe even like proceed to say, oh, this is a spam call, we just don't answer. But for him, it was like, oh no, like this is actually going to impact my life. In some way.
I mean, I think that even touches like on something deeper too. Like, it shows that like a lot of the time we're able to like tune out a lot of stuff, right? Like we're allowed to tune out this like these social like telemarketers and so many other things. But when you're coming into a different country, you're able to like really explore it, and you're able to like really see it
the
with
little
fresh
things,
eyes.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that like, especially for me, I'm a huge advocate of this. I feel like you really have to explore your own city. Even if you grew up there, like in Lethbridge, I grew up there, and I feel like I always have to explore it, and I have to find different things in there. Like I have to go to different restaurants. I have to continuously, it's so easy to get caught in a loop where you're doing the exact same thing every day. But really like exploring that location, because it is different. Like there's so much diversity within one location. Like looking at different neighborhoods. Like I'm sure that you.
Oh yeah, neighborhood living in one side of the city might have like, you literally have a completely different, and this kind of goes like the worldview as well. If you kind of look through like what your lens is, right? Like if you're living in like a nice neighborhood compared to like a not so nice neighborhood, your norms are gonna differ quite like drastically, actually, right? And I wouldn't say that like there probably are like complete norms where like I live in Regina, I live in a nice neighborhood, I live in Lethbridge, and I live in a nice neighborhood. Those norms are probably quite similar. And then the norms of, oh, I live in a bad neighborhood in Regina, and I live in a bad neighborhood in Lethbridge. I think that the norms would be quite similar there, just because we are in a quite like similar city. But I actually wonder how it would be different in like a completely different country, where the norms like in general are different.
Yeah, and I mean, even if I'm thinking about like, we actually had this conversation earlier today, and actually yesterday about like residents and like if we were on a different floor,
Yeah.
like how would that change, like how we live, how like what we do, and I feel like it would have like a significant
Well,
impact.
yeah.
Like the people you hang out with, like are usually the people that are close to you, like
Yeah, well,
so.
it's the thing where I guess we could see it as a neighborhood, right? Let's just let's just formally say it as a neighborhood. So the neighborhood that we're on, I mean, when the more you spend time with someone, I mean, you're just going to be naturally kind of you kind of act in the same way, you kind of do the same things, and I mean, you kind of become the people that you hang around, right? And so I think that actually is a really big difference. Like, if you're living in a really nice and expensive place where lots of opportunities are happening, there's lots of business owner things like that, you're gonna be exposed to a lot of more of those things and those opportunities, and just in general, you're gonna be probably better off for success rather than some place where the opportunities aren't there just because of who you hang around, right? Like it's actually quite simple if you put it in terms of that.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, I completely agree.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also that other idea of because when we define location, I mean, we said it wasn't a particular location, but I mean, within that the attributes of it, it is a geographic location of where you live. Like, if you're living on the coast, near oceans, near mountains, like even like Salt Lake City, it's quite interesting actually. Like their entire city is like surrounded with mountains. So I kind of want to touch on how like the actual geographic and the things that are kind of within the attributes of that location kind of affects like how you grew up even, or like what you did, right? Like me growing up living in a flat land, it was quite, I mean, there wasn't much to do, right? Like you just drive around and you just kind of meet up with friends and just grab food, whereas maybe if you were to live in like a bigger city, like maybe like area in the States like New York or Vancouver or Toronto, you'd probably have a lot more to do. You go shopping a lot more. And I think that maybe even would even play into like honestly like even like economic things, because like if you're going shopping more often, like you're spending more money and things like that. So I don't know, like how would you say your geographic location would kind of impact your childhood and your growing up?
Yeah, the way that you're thinking of it is like completely different than the way that I'm thinking of it. I was
Really?
thinking like you're on a small fishing boat, like, where you're like some like farmer, like
No.
rice farmer. I was thinking of it like way within a different
Way
context.
extremely,
Yeah, I was thinking of it like at a much more extreme level.
Well, I mean, we could probably discuss that as well.
That's
But
that's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely see it that way too, where just the different things that you're doing are based on your location, right? And it's obviously your relationship to that land too. I
Yeah.
think that like that's like a big factor that you have to realize too with like geographic, especially like if you live on the coast but you hate fishing, you're obviously not going to do much fishing. But
no.
and like if you live like even in Alberta, like I do like a decent amount of fishing, like probably more than some of the people
Really?
here, some of
Oh.
the people here who, well, I mean, I don't go out like deep sea
Yeah.
fishing. I just go with like my dad or my friends or my family.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that. So like it's about like your interests too, but for sure like geographic location has so much to do with like what
Interest
different
even
things.
can pursue even.
Yeah, and like what your culture is. Like if you grew up in a culture where like you relied on fishing, like you're probably going to enjoy fishing more than someone who didn't. Like,
Yeah.
and
Or maybe even the opposite way though, because you could maybe start to hate fishing because you did it all the time, right? Like
yeah, I mean it goes both ways for sure. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, like even like there's even a hindrance on what your interest can possibly be, because me being in Regina, I again, I didn't have the opportunities to pursue interests that maybe you could in like in a place like in the U.S., right, or like even Hawaii. Like I can't pursue surfing if I live on farm, like and things like that's just one example. Like it's not that I want to surf, but like I never even would know if I want to surf, because like I can't do it, right? And so like I think that like that would honestly affect how you lead your life as well, because maybe if you were to it actually would impact a lot how you lead your life, because I mean you lead your life on your passions, well hopefully you are, but if I were to say like, oh, I'm living on in LA or something, there would probably be a lot more things and different passions I'd be exposed to that could like lead into my life. Whereas here, like, okay, I'm like, oh, I'm just kind of have those basic professions where I can go into that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that's actually quite interesting to think about.
Yeah, and I know for me, like when I my parents really encouraged me to find what I'm passionate about and what I really want to do. And the way that they did that was by like really getting me involved in a lot of different things. Right?
Yeah, being exposed to most of the things you see.
So like you're just getting exposed to different things when you're in different countries.
Yeah.
Like I know I'm thinking of my friend who lives in Turkmenistan right now, and he was telling me about how there was this really big issue with like an oil leakage and whatnot, and how he got really involved with that, and like that's just like completely different than
Yeah,
like
that would never really...
yeah, I mean I feel like it'd be a completely different situation if that were to happen in at least like in Lethbridge or like near me. So like just like the different like opportunities are completely different from location to location, and I'm sure that they're different from Lethbridge to Regina, and they're different from Calgary to any other city in Canada or around the world, really. So
yeah, like I'm from India, and seeing like, I mean, realistically speaking, the opportunities in India are quite drastically, just completely different actually. Like, I mean, to think about it, your lifestyle is completely different. You instead of going to a grocery store, we have like people there's a guy with a table usually that literally has fruits on a table, and he walks down the street and at a certain time, and you always come out, you hear him come out by, so you always come out, and you buy fruits from him. And like, it's not like you formally go to like a grocery store every day and go get food. You actually have fresh fruits and fresh food every day. Like my when I went to India, my aunt and uncle did, when they want to make supper, they'd actually go and buy the food like on the day, like they wouldn't have it in a fridge ready, right? And I think that maybe also has to do with like the climate as well. Like obviously the stuff doesn't stay as good as here. Like we could buy bananas and it'd last for like a lot longer than somewhere in like India. So like even the lifestyle change within that would be quite different. And for the people that aren't like kind of familiar with how India works, like there is a lot of like a lot of economic disparity where there's either there is middle class people, but there is a lot of like very very poor people who work the streets. Who there's normal people have maids and things like that. So like it's quite a different lifestyle, and that would really, I mean, that kind of breaks my heart that like somebody like kind of would be like born into like the maid lifestyle where they wouldn't really have an opportunity to get out of that because their parents don't really have the money to pay for an education, and education is completely different in India as well, where really you pay to be tutored. Like everyone has a tutor, and they outside of class, and that's where they actually learn the things, and nobody actually really goes to class. They just go to class to do their exams.
Really?
So yeah, so like if you aren't able to afford a tutor or like actually afford proper education, you're not going to be able to succeed on those exams, and then it's a cycle from there, right? You're not able to get into the schools, you're not able to have like the marks, and then it kind of just leads into the same cycle. So Here it's quite different, where everyone has opportunity to at least educate, like the basic education of high school and whatnot. So yeah, like that's a big thing actually.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hesitate at the idea of like saying like everyone has the opportunity, because just because we have the opportunity doesn't mean
that's fair.
We
That's
can
fair.
actually like
Yeah,
pursue
I
that
actually
to
take
the
that
same
back, yeah.
to the same
Yeah.
extent. But I mean, yeah, like I'm really grateful that like all of our public schools I feel like do offer like a similar education, and do offer like a good curriculum where we can learn and we can grow as people, right? Because that's what I feel like it was really focused around. And maybe I'm just biased because because my mom's an educator, and I have a few people in my family who are educators, but yeah, I definitely feel like
Well, yeah, I don't think I should have made that generalization, actually. That's actually a good point, because when I say everyone, I kind of made a generalization on everyone that lives in Canada. But honestly, like being able to actually have access to education and being able to pursue it to a certain extent is a completely different thing. Where if your home life is very hectic or things like that, you're not able to pursue the education the same way as somebody else would, right? And I even saw the disparity between schools, right? Like where one school is actually way better at creating a successful students rather than another one, and it's actually kind of heartbreaking to see that like the rich people actually went to the nicer school, and the people who were kind of on the lower end of that spectrum kind of went to the school that didn't provide those. And I don't know if that's probably because of a different cycle as well that's probably not mentioned, which is a cycle where like obviously they don't have the drive or other things because of other things that are going on in their life, right? But yeah, that's kind of that's a bad generalization to make. I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you're looking at like schools, but then especially the states, I feel like you're able to, depending on which neighborhood you're in, you're able to go to a completely different school.
Yeah.
Like you're
Yeah.
able to go to, like if you're in one neighborhood, you could be going to a school that has a dropout rate of like 40% or something.
Yeah.
And then, but if you're at another one, you could be going where it's a direct feeder to like Harvard or like
Yeah.
Ivy Leagues.
No,
So
like-
like depending on where you even live, like that can be a huge indicator for your
Well,
success as like an individual. So.
Well, that's exactly how it worked for me though. Like, the rich side of town literally fed into the nice schools.
Really?
Yeah, like and it was really weird because the rich side was like the school was like actually in the south end, and the kind of like the richer side was like kind of the east side, and a little bit of the south as well. What like was kind of like the more nicer side, and it fed into the school that was like probably a lot like nicer than some of the other ones that are in the non-economic sides, and you literally could not make that like change. Like if you wanted to go there, they would not allow it.
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
it's
That's too bad to hear, actually.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know what the education system's like in Saskatchewan and whatnot, because I guess we have a completely different curriculum and whatnot than you, so that's just really interesting to hear. I would have never thought that, but
Yeah.
yeah. Because I guess with location, like, it's hard to know exactly what's going on in someone else's life, like, and all of that type of things, right? So.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's quite a disparity, but yeah, I think we kind of touched on a lot of the factors and a lot of the different things that kind of come with being in location, and I think it would be actually really cool if we came back to this after we kind of, well, I mean, I'm a 17-year-old kid that hasn't really seen has been exposed to a lot of the world yet, but I think it'd be pretty cool if we come back to this idea after we've maybe traveled or experienced some different locations around the world. So maybe stay tuned for that. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, no, I think the main idea that we kind of touched on was location has a lot to do with opportunity and what kind of things that you can do growing up and look forward to and lead to for passions to pursue and things like that. Yeah. So do you have any other ideas or thoughts?
Yeah, and I mean, just to continue off what you were saying, like, your location has everything to do with your experiences and really how you perceive the land around you and like what opportunities you get, what beliefs you have, all these different factors. And we touched on a lot of those, and I thought that we had a really great discussion on this, and yeah, like we just really want to push past that definition of location as a particular place, and really go into how location is really so much more, and it's all those different attributes and factors that can really come into your identity. And be careful when you're picking where you want to live. Really, I guess that's like kind of how
real,
we
for real.
Be careful where you want to live, because that can have it can have a much bigger impact than
what you really
think,
think.
than what you'd think. So
yeah. Well, guys, that's the impact of location on social norms. There you go. If our website's probably gonna be going up particularly soon, so you'll be able to probably check out our website team, our media team with Jarrett, all of our bios and things like that. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed, and catch you guys next time.